Hello, thinkers. I hope you all are doing great and staying safe and healthy. Today, it's Saturday morning, and we are back here again with our expert speaker, Thomas Abraham, sir. And he's doing an incredible work in entrepreneurship journey, and he's working with multiple companies like HR Tech, Hexa Ventures. He's the founder of HR Tech, T Ventures. He's been managing director at Hexa Ventures, and he is working in these companies to help them scale and providing guidance on business strategies in the SaaS-based market. So he'll be taking all your doubts upon how to scale up the companies, how to scale up the SaaS-based startups, and let's see what are his views about the SaaS-based startups. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lakshay, for that introduction. And so, friends, it's great to be with you here. So, just as a quick intro, I'm Thomas Abraham. I'm the managing director of Hexa Global Ventures. We are a business accelerator based in the US with a sharp focus on SaaS companies, which are around HR technology, work technology. And our objective really is to identify really good companies from around the world and see what does it take for us to land and expand them in the US. And by this, I mean looking at establishing product market fit. What does it take to hire some good talent for these organizations? How can we raise capital? How can we get some initial pilot customers and strategic partnerships, and what have you? Really doing all the heavy lifting for a SaaS company that wishes to enter the US. I also help companies based in India and the Asia Pacific region with their business strategy, go to market. So it's very exciting to be here. Hopefully, talking to some young entrepreneurs. So, with that, let me just dive into our topic for today, which is really decoding SaaS startups' success. And I just wanted to jog my own memory to about 15 years ago when I was attending a global conference of one of the companies that I was running in India. I was running the subsidiary of a multinational, which was in the product space, and they had products in areas like ERP, CRM, HRMS, payroll, and what have you. And at this particular and predominantly most of our products were on premise. In fact, 95% of our revenues came from on premise or desktop products, and this is, I'm talking about 15 years ago. And I recollect in that particular conference, the leadership actually came on stage and said that software as a service, or SaaS, is actually a pie in the sky, really, because, in their view, the world domination was by on-premise products. And, it was really contextual at that time because bulk of their revenues came from that space. And in fact, 60% of their annual recurring revenue came through maintenance and support services. So that was really amazing. So since they lived in that legacy stage, their focus really was on legacy product. And sooner than later, we had a lot of competition, which was started to bite at our heels, mostly SaaS startups in many of these areas that I spoke of. And that led to a lot of competitive pressure because this company had not invested in SaaS. So they really struggled to cope with the changing business environment, which happened quite rapidly. And in the process had to exit quite a few markets, had to sell some of their portfolio companies, and had to actually rejig their entire portfolio. And that's sort of the story of a lot of legacy software companies, because they have lived in that stage and they have really struggled to realize how SaaS is actually taking over. So why is the SaaS actually booming? And I thought, let me just outline a few reasons. I'm sure most of you are familiar, but just to give you an idea, today a lot of businesses are looking for best of breed processes, which can be deployed quite easily. Now, having said that, there could be a lot of large enterprises which also say that, look, I'm happy to take a SaaS product, but I would like that to be customized to my requirements to some extent, because a lot of large enterprises may have some unique requirements. So clearly, SaaS companies also have now the ability, and the companies which are operating in the enterprise space also have created platforms which enable customizations at a particular entity level without really impacting the core offering of that particular product. So really SaaS can now address, it can address SMB, mid market, enterprises. Likewise, obviously, it's much easier to deploy upgrades, that may happen, updates and upgrades to the software, because I recollect my days running a legacy product software company where it was a nightmare, and we had to charge for professional services to get all that done. Uh, so that's really the second point. The other thing which is also very obvious is that today there is a ready-made infrastructure which is hugely cost effective. There are hosting platforms like Azure and many others, and there is internet access which is now very, very easily available. The costs are surely affordable. It's also available in rural areas, and therefore SaaS applications can easily be ruled out even in smaller towns and cities. The next thought really is that if you really look around, newer functionalities and newer technologies, they're all born in the cloud. So any company which is actually SaaS companies. And we all know that today consumers are mobile first, right? So if you're mobile first, you really are SaaS first. So that's really another reason why you need to be really SaaS first when you build a product. From a business standpoint, it is today much easier for a company to switch products. So if I'm running an enterprise company and I have adopted a particular software, and I see that 2 years later there is better software available, it is much easier for me to switch because the switching costs are far lower because there's no infrastructure involved and so on and so forth. And therefore, it also opens an opportunity for SaaS startups which are even getting into red oceans. So, for example, if you're getting into areas like CRM or ERP or HRMS, payroll, conversational AI, which is flooded with products and platforms around the world, you still have an opportunity because there could be potentially a huge replacement market if you have an innovation with you. So therefore, I think the race continues. It's not that somebody will dominate it today and continue to dominate it. And finally, with the pandemic, we've seen that companies have been focusing on digital transformation. And what better way than actually adopting SaaS platforms to really drive that digital transformation? So today, really, if you look at a lot of enterprise companies in very mature markets like the US and Europe and so on, you'll find that many of them are using over 100 SaaS applications. And the reason they're able to do that is because they're quick to deploy and you're able to see the benefits fairly quickly. So I'll be happy to take questions, and please feel free to in the comment section to sort of shoot questions down at me. So there is a question from Sarthak, but I'll just come to that. He says, what are the fundamental metrics for a SaaS business? So let me address it in a slightly different way by really saying, to my mind, what are the critical success factors for a SaaS business, right? And there are a lot of critical success factors out there. And let me look at the business angle of it. So the first question really to ask is, how are you really innovating? Is there innovation in the true sense? Now, if you ask most founders, they will say, yes, we have an innovation. But when they actually go out into the market and when they test it, the answer could be quite different. So let me just give you an example. So I recollect about 6 years ago, I was advising a company called Infido, which is doing now extremely well in the employee engagement space. And those days, I recollect the only way in which organizations could get a temperature of their employees was really via these annual surveys. So most companies were just using annual surveys, and there were lots of platforms available for these annual surveys. So Infido actually created that innovation by saying that, we have a bot which can engage with employees on an ongoing basis based on their stage, based on their life cycle in the company, in a very human way, and start getting real-time feedback. And the advantage of real-time feedback is that then you really know what is happening with your employees. You know what are the concerns that are there, what is going well, what's not going too well, and you're also able to understand who are the employees who are perhaps dissatisfied and likely to leave, and so on and so forth. So we were able to innovate and bring something unique. Now, having said that, 6 years down the line, there are lots of companies which are doing it, but having that initial advantage, makes a significant difference. The other area really is that are you able to identify a gap in the market segment? So, for example, as I mentioned earlier, there are lots of red oceans today. Most areas that you look at are full of red oceans. There are plenty of companies that are operating in it. So, is there a way in which, if you're not able to innovate in that core area, is there an adjacency that you can focus on? Because that's another great way in which one can actually drive success. And let me give you an example here. I came across a very interesting company out of Singapore by the name of NextPage. This is a SaaS company in the B2C space, and let me just give you some background. Today, there are lots of organizations, which are converting books into ebooks and things of that kind, so that you can read it online. There are a whole lot of companies which have also built capabilities in creating summaries of these books. So you've got a large book, most people don't have the time to read it. They'd be quite happy to read a summary of that book. And that's big business now. There are lots of companies doing it. But what NextPage has done is they have looked at an adjacency. They've said that, look, can we look at language books in certain languages, and can we translate them into other languages in which our audience is there, and create summaries of those. So they've identified Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, and they've looked at some great books which otherwise people would not have access to, and they have translating them into Southeast Asian languages like Malay and Filipino and Thai and Indonesian and Vietnamese and so on, and English, and saying that, look, therefore now there could be a whole new market which has access to books from China and Korea and so on, which otherwise they would, and Japan, which otherwise they would not have access to. So I think it's important to start looking at perhaps some of these adjacencies. There are lots of questions streaming out there, but let me just finish my thoughts around some of the critical success factors before I take them up. The third thing is really establishing product market fit, and I want to talk in a little more detail because this is a very important area, and a lot of SaaS founders tend to underestimate product market fit. So it's really about, are there some early adopters? Are there some early pilots that you can get going, which really tells you that your product is actually fitting into the kind of market requirement that you have, and the market requirement is fairly significant. The fourth area that I just wanted to touch upon is really the ability of founders to be able to pivot at an early stage. So, talking really about an Infido example, when we started, we were having an idea generation platform, a town hall platform, and I think we quickly realized that it was important to get into an area based on feedback that we were getting from heads of HR, into an area that was really more important than all this. And that's how the pivot really happened into employee engagement. And then that business has really grown at a very, very significant rate. Fifthly, I think also it's important for startups to see what does it take for setting up some partnerships at an early stage. And this is something that I've realized a lot of startup founders struggle with, because they do not know that, look, if they have an innovation, there could be a great opportunity for a partnership even at an early stage. And that's something that I've actually personally specialized in, to really figure out what are those golden nuggets available in that startup, and is there a way in which we can plug that into a bigger system and therefore get the entire go-to-market engine going. So, for instance, recently, we did a partnership of a learning platform called iCog. We did a partnership with an HRMS platform. And by doing that, we were able to immediately access over 700 customers of the HRMS product company. Likewise, there could also be opportunities of doing a white label deals. Now, this is something again sometimes SaaS founders are very hesitant to do. They feel that it should be all about their brand, but it's really about momentum. It's about product market fit. It's about acceleration. So sometimes there could be great opportunities of doing some of these white label. There could be some great white label opportunities out there. In fact, currently, I'm taking some great SaaS companies from Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific into the US, and many of them are very early stage, but we are looking at some very significant white label opportunities in the US. Because if you look at the US market, you'll find that the US market has been around for, has been the tech space has been around for a much longer time. So there's a lot of legacy products, and many of them are now looking at replacing the legacy with state of the art tech. And sometimes it may not be possible to go and build everything yourself, and it may be much faster for you to actually go and do a white label, right? So that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about. Then there's this whole thing around platform versus product. So sometimes when you build a product, you might say that I want to do something which is more end to end, which is a platform, versus something which is very narrow. And let me again give you an example to illustrate this. There's a company that I work with called Map Recruit, which is a talent acquisition platform, and they do everything right from sourcing of CVs from job boards to parsing them. They parse the job descriptions. They do a matching ranking of CVs with job description. Then they do a prioritization, or what we call as stack ranking of the CVs against those job descriptions. And then it moves to the next stage, which is the interviewing. So they have a video interviewing platform. They have an audio bot which can do an interview. They also have a chat bot which can engage with candidates and prioritize the kind of roles that they should actually apply for. So it's a complete platform that they have end to end. At the same time, they're also able to sell them as independent products. So if somebody says, I only want a great parser, they're able to do that. Somebody says, I just want a video interviewing platform, they're able to do that. So sometimes it's important for you to realize that, hey, do we take a platform approach? Because that also gives you a scope for you to be more end to end. At the same time, it opens up doors for certain narrow opportunities on specific products that you have within the platform. Then there's the example of SaaS companies of whether they should take a single product or a multi-product approach. And often it's advised that you take a single product approach, because and then you build scale, you get 500,000 customers, and then you build your second product, which can hopefully you can sell to which is in an adjacent space, but the decision maker is common. So I think that gives a great traction for you to be able to accelerate your revenues as well. So that's really a single versus multiple product. I've also come across some great opportunities where you look at I spoke about product versus platform. It could also be product versus technology. So I came across this very interesting company called All Sorted out of Ireland, who have built a great technology for redacting information. So they've come out with different use cases. So the first use case was to determine how redaction of content can add value to diversity hiring, for instance. Likewise, they're now looking at a second use case in the healthcare space, and there's a third use case in the education space. And finally, I think it's also important for SaaS startups as one of the critical success factors to have an open architecture, because today, as I had mentioned before, when you go into an enterprise, you'll find that they have several products. Many of these large enterprises may have 200 plus SaaS products out there. So how is it that your product can fit into a bigger ecosystem? So that's something which again you should actually look at. Okay, so let me now quickly look at some questions out here and see whether I can answer them before I move on to the next section. So there's a question from Sarthak which says, what is your general approach when managing team members who are exceptional performers? I think this is a great question, because I think in today's day and age, there's a great demand for exceptional performers, and there is a premium on exceptional performers. So the way I would look at exceptional performers is to see that how can we make them more long-term within our organization? how can we give them equity, for instance? If they have already proven themselves, how can they become really part of the long term organization? Because it's very difficult to build uh, talent if you start having attrition on an ongoing basis. So SaaS companies have the opportunity of giving equity. So I think I would really encourage companies to give equity to team members who are great performers. Likewise, how can you give them independent charge of projects? Because a lot of exceptional team members like a lot of independence in actually what they do. So if you are building a product, if you are scaling a product, then are there some special projects that you can give them, right, which can actually help them become intrapreneurs? So you are an entrepreneur in residence within your organization. So how can you actually do that? So that's again a interesting way of doing it. So the other question is from Asghar Khan. He says, in your experience, how is selling SaaS different from other types of sales you've conducted? This is a great question, because I think what we need to understand in SaaS, and I had mentioned to you before, is that it's a subscription business. And therefore, cost of acquisition is a very, very important thing, right? If you have to build a successful SaaS business, your cost of acquisition has to be optimized. We have to look at, so it's not just about the salesperson selling, it's about the entire package. So the product person is involved, right? So because the product has to be far easier to deploy, it has to be far more simple to use. Only then can the sales cycles get reduced. So in SaaS, we have to always focus on how can we repeat a formula, how can we reduce sales cycles, because our initial cost could be quite high given the cost of acquisition that happens in the first year, in the first month, and then the revenue is over a period of time, right? So it takes 12 months for you maybe to recover your cost of customer acquisition. Ideally, it should be much less than that for a company to be profitable. So I think it's important for selling SaaS. The mindset has to be very different, in the sense that we have to look at how can we automate selling, how can we simplify selling, and therefore how can the product be simplified, how can the onboarding of the product be simplified as well, right? And how can you have a very standard pitch for pitching the product, because you're not customizing the product. If you look at legacy products, customers have lots of requirements. So how do you really get your messaging right? I think that's extremely important, so that you can standardize your entire sales pitch. Okay, there's a question from Punit Jain, which says, as we are growing as startup, managing the team, how to create loyalty amongst them? There is a lot of poaching, high-end salary. So yeah, I mean, I touched upon this before. This is the reality of life, that if you have great performers, they will leave. So you have to build in a long-term incentive plan for good performers. Now there's always good attrition and bad attrition, right? So we have to focus on what we would like to prevent in terms of attrition. Therefore, it's important for the employees to feel part of a family, and that can happen if you empower them, if you give them projects that they can do independently, and you build in a long-term incentive plan, which is through equity. Okay, question from Varun Bansal. Where can a startup gain knowledge about SaaS products? Well, there's lots of information available on the internet, and you can connect with me offline. And I have a YouTube channel as well, where I have done lots of videos on SaaS. Please feel free to visit that. I have put it on the chat as well. Anamika Sharma says, you mentioned partnerships are important, but often the partnerships are considered a favor on the one who's proposing it. This serves as a hindrance in exploration and expansion of partnership. Yeah, I think that's a great thought, Anamika. And firstly, it's important for you to believe that you have something unique. And I think we should not discount the fact that many large companies out there, it could be consulting firms or much larger companies out there, who are looking at the partnership, they are also in a competitive space. They are being challenged constantly. So they are also looking for how can they partner with nimble-footed startups. That is the reality. Okay, it is not that I am proposing the partners, so I am at the receiving end. No, I have a strong proposition. It's about how can I sell my proposition. So to give you an example, which I gave earlier, I spoke about ICOG, the learning platform. So when we spoke to this HRMS company who had 700 customers, they had a gap in learning, and there was a market demand in learning, and they couldn't go and build it themselves. So they are looking for a good startup to actually collaborate with, to actually plug in that particular proposition. So it's not easy. It's a very specialized thing. It's a skillful thing. Building a strategic partnership is not the cup of tea of every founder, and that's why they get advisors like me to help them, to really help them identify who could be those potential partners, not just in India but globally, and how do we really build a value proposition which is win-win for all. Okay, so I think thanks so much for those flurry of questions. Yes,
Sir,
Lakshit, anything to say?
yes, sir. We do have some questions in private chat that I have shared, so please give it a look.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. So there are some questions here. Okay, I've heard the term multiple times, B2B, B2C. Can you please explain this? Yeah, so B2B is what? It's a business to business. So if I have an enterprise software product, or a product which I'm selling to SMBs, mid-market, and or to enterprises, I'm trying to solve a business problem. So that's a B2B, business to business. B2C is really where I'm selling it to end consumers. So I gave you the example of the company called NextPage, who are doing book summaries of translations. So they're translating from some languages into other languages and doing 15-minute summaries, and their audience is consumers. So that's a B2C business, right? So that's what I thought I should explain. Another question: how to optimize the idea based on regions? Like if I'm leading an edtech startup, then it's a cakewalk in urban regions, but if you go higher, other areas, internet connections is not prior, there's a huge potential. I think the first thing as a startup is that you have to define your ideal customer profile, and that's extremely important. See, once you've defined your ideal customer profile, then what are the features that you're going to have for that? How are you going to deliver the product? All that starts to fall into place. So I think if you are a product, if you're in the edtech space and you're going to be selling in markets where there is no internet access, then you've got to think of a delivery mechanism which is offline, right? Is there preloaded software available which can be given on a device? So you got to think of other ways of doing it. But the starting point is, who is your ideal customer profile? And then the solutioning is all around that. Okay, what are your views on Elon Musk's move on Twitter? I think it's not relevant to this conversation, so I'll skip it for now. I've just started my corporate life working as in a startup. I have a cafe business doing excellent. I'm shifting cloud kitchens. Any advice? I want to start something of my own. Yeah, I think the starting point for you to really to see is, what is the market opportunity? So do enough research. What is the market opportunity? Is there a niche that you can focus on? So if you want to start a cloud kitchen, there are lots of cloud kitchens today, right? What is the niche that you can operate in? I think it's important for you to understand that. And is there anybody else in that? And how am I going to do something which is different? I think that bit of homework is really the key before you start putting your hard-earned money into anything. Right? Okay, so friends, with that, I just wanted to move on to another important topic, which is what I call as a product market fit, right? That's something which is highly underestimated by a lot of founders. In fact, I was reading some SaaS founders were talking about it, and one of them really said that 80% of SaaS companies never make product market fit. Right, and the reason is they're too much in a hurry to make revenue, so they tend to go all over the place, and then suddenly you find that there is a lot of competition out there, and you're struggling. Okay, another study which I came across said that startups need about 2 to 3 times longer to validate their market than most founders expect. So this underestimation creates this pressure to scale prematurely. So sometimes you might end up trying to scale your business prematurely without really establishing that product market fit, right? And what can then therefore happen if you try and scale prematurely is that you may end up spending a lot of money on the product. You may spend a lot of money on sales and marketing, and then you may end up not really getting the kind of returns that you're actually looking for. So therefore, it's really important in this exercise of product market, because the product market fit also helps you determine your ideal customer profile. So there's another US VC who says that up to about 10,000 MRR, which is monthly recurring revenue, you only have an illusion of a product market fit. Between 10,000 and 100,000 MRR, you have some semblance of a product market fit. And it's only from 100,000 to 500,000 MRR that you really start to actually having that sweet spot as far as your product market fit is concerned. And then only you start defining your ideal customer profile. And this product market fit is really important, because until that time you really do not know whether you're building a solution that solves a real problem which is large enough, which is a large enough market for you to actually monetize. And without that clarity, you will end up burning a lot of money, as I mentioned, building product, hiring a lot of people, and it may not really be commercially viable. And actually, premature scaling is often cited as one of the main reasons for SaaS startup failure, right? Uh, so there's another question here from Anamika, which says, how important is hierarchy in a startup? Do predefined roles help in adding method to madness? I think it's an evolution. I think it's important for us to understand the skill sets of the people that we have already hired. Okay, if you are a strong salesperson, for example, you may not really fit into an operations role, and vice versa, right? So I think it's important for us to define roles for people. It's not about hierarchy, it's about roles. Hierarchy comes as you build scale, as you have more people, but at an early stage, it's really about getting people on board who can deliver and address a specific pain area that you have. I think that's what I would really focus on. So any reference to learning for all the startup based terms? I think there's lots of information on the internet. You could just reach out to me separately offline, and I could guide you and help you with that, right? So so let me talk a little bit about about what I believe should be some of the priorities for an early stage SaaS company. And I believe that one of the priorities should be, to my mind, should be to establish a partnership with an incubator or an accelerator, or be part of an incubator or an accelerator. Now, if you looked at this about 5 years ago, there were very few incubators and accelerators around, and most of them really did not have the ability to really do anything significant. But the situation is different today. Today, the market is full of them. And therefore, I would really strongly advise anyone who's doing a startup to really look at that, because there are lots of benefits that you could get out of it. You could be part of a cohort, so you get to engage with other startups. You get access to advisors, seed capital, perhaps better understanding of product positioning. You may get some doors open for some initial pilots, product market fit, and so on. So I think that's really important. The second thing is really, how do you define who should be your right co-founders? What are the complementary skills that they can bring to the table to really help you? I think thirdly, and as you build your product, as you develop your product, is it possible to get an anchor customer who is a relatively well-known brand, and actually, over a period, really help build your product? Because it's important for you to get on regular feedback as you build that product. So I think getting some anchor customer is again something extremely important. It's not mandatory, but I'm just telling you about some of the things that I believe are critical for an early stage startup. I mean, I always believe it's important for you to define what are some gaps in your own understanding and your own abilities, and therefore to see, is there an advisor or two that you can help, who can get on board, because you need them most in the early stage. You may not need them once you build some scale and raise a lot of capital, because a lot of VCs may bring a lot of capability on advising themselves. But at an early stage, that's really important. So what does it take for you to identify the right kind of advisor who can help you? And I'm also a believer that you should look at marketing yourself actively on social media and LinkedIn, because I've always believed that a zero marketing budget model can work extremely well. And today, LinkedIn provides a great platform, and there are lots of other social media platforms for B2B and SaaS that you should leverage to be able to build some kind of a brand equity for yourself. Get some of your anchor customers to talk about you. Make them your fans, make them your brand ambassadors. A lot of founders do not have the ability and skill to do that. How do you make it's a whole topic that I can talk about. How do you make your customers, your fans, and your brand ambassadors? And that's a topic very close to my heart, and that's something that I would always encourage founders to focus on to really make that happen. And finally, do you have the vision for a global story? So sometimes a startup may be very regional in nature because it's addressing a regulatory requirement like accounting or a payment gateway and what have you. But otherwise, you could be solving a global problem. So, do you have a global vision? And I encourage a lot of startups and a lot of investors say, no, don't do that, focus on local market and so on. But I'm one who often says that if you have an innovation, that's something unique, and we're able to test it effectively in our home market, how quickly can we start looking at moving internationally? Because that opportunity we should not miss out, because that opportunity could be very, very, very significant. So that's something again I just wanted to touch upon and sort of share with you folks. Any other questions? I'm happy to take. And so, Lakshya, do tell me, when we have to close this discussion. But I'm happy to talk about a few more things if you have the time.
Yeah, so we do have the time, but in case some questions come up from the audience side, we would be very happy to take it up. So
Yep, yep,
let's
yep.
see.
So, if there are any questions, because I've spoken about a lot of things, and I don't want to overcrowd this particular webinar with too many things, right? We can do that at a subsequent webinar as well. So, if there are any other questions, I think I have addressed all the questions as of now. In this, if there are any other questions, I am happy to take, because I think we've
Okay, so
already hit.
the question goes like this. My question: I have seen folks talking about startups and all the terms somewhere around. They don't have the prior knowledge about that. They struggle to find the right resource, we can say, but making a brand is not like opting a course and spending hours. So, what the recipe you will advise someone who is just thinking to initiate their startups?
Yeah, I would recommend somebody who's looking at initiating a start. Firstly, there is today plenty of free information on the web. There's no need of doing any course. I think firstly, are you an entrepreneur? That's what you have to determine. Okay, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to do something on your own, and you have first think of the idea that you have, and then bounce that idea off people. Don't see, a lot of people don't bounce ideas. They feel somebody will steal their idea. No, nobody will steal your idea, because they're busy doing their own stuff. Go to people who can give you honest feedback, which means do not go to your friends and family. A lot of people go to friends and family, they will only say good things. Go to people, okay, who will give you honest feedback, and who will tell you whether this, who will tell you things in black and white. I think getting feedback on your idea is the first step. Second thing, as you mentioned, Lakshit, is if you want to know more about all the terms and things of that kind, please, do a Google search. You will get, based on the domain that you're in, there is tons and tons of information that you will get. If anybody wants any specific information, they're happy to reach out to me. I'm available on LinkedIn. Please reach out to me, connect with me, send me a question. I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, so perfect. So, guys, I have
Yeah,
shared the LinkedIn profiles of
yeah,
Adam sir in the comment section, so you can just connect with him and ask any doubts and queries, whatever you have after the
yeah,
sessions. Do if you get any something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and also Lakshit, I have also in the private chat, so you could put it on the comments. I have also given a link to my YouTube channel, which is Musings with Thomas Abraham. I do a lot of interviews. I talk about the future of SaaS, the future of sales, future of HR technology. I do a lot of interviews every week with business leaders, startup founders, and there's some real exciting stuff. So if you could put that as well for people to check out, and they could reach out to me if they have some specific questions.
Yeah, so it's up on the screen also, so you can just check
Yeah,
it out, guys. This is the amazing link, so you can just
yeah,
check out sir's work, what he has been doing, in or with all his experience and exposure that he already
yeah,
had. So if you have any queries, any questions, so please let us know. Otherwise, we can wrap this session here right
yeah.
now. So
Right.
any questions, guys? Last call for your queries. So if you have any queries, please feel free to drop your queries in the comment sections. Okay. I guess there are no queries now. So
Yeah.
let's see. So, sir, thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. Thank you for giving your incredible insights about SaaS-based startups, about startups, how to initiate startups. It was really inspiring and it was really informative for us to host
Right.
you. And it's my own pleasure to host you for this session. So we are. I'm very happy to collaborate with you, and I'm hoping to collaborate with you in future events too. So
Right.
thank you, sir.
Absolutely. No, no, thank you so
Yes.
much, Lakshit, and thanks so much to Reskill for this opportunity and the Azure community. Yeah, look forward to engaging with you. Please feel free to reach out to me at LinkedIn. I'm happy to, connect with everyone and address any questions that you may have. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you, sir. So, okay, so sir, there is a last question from in the chat comment section. What is the recipe for failure in startups?
I think the recipe for failure is to not get feedback and not take your feedback seriously, right? A lot of founders I've met, I meet a lot of startup founders. Many people keep reaching out to me, brainstorm. And the thing about a lot of them is that you don't do a reality check, right? And getting a reality check, and I spoke about product market fit, that's a reality check. 80% of startups fail because there is no product market fit. It's product market fit is in your mind, but it's not out there. So make sure that your idea is viable, which means get honest feedback from people who are not your friends and family. Go to strangers who you believe who have knowledge in that space and who can give you good correct advice, because they have nothing to gain or lose from giving you that correct advice. And if the innovation is good, please do enough research to ensure that there is product market fit.
So I'm sorry, guys. So any other questions? I guess this was the last question. So thank you, sir. Thank you for joining in. Thank you everyone for joining in. You, I hope, sir, solved your doubts and queries that you are having in your mind. I hope this session was insightful for you. So thank you for joining in. So we'll be very happy to collaborate in future events and Azure developer communities coming up with lots of initiative boot camps for students, for professional, working professionals, industrial experts, and you can collaborate with the community work like in form of blogs, YouTube videos, and whatever ways you want. So thank you everyone. Thank you for joining in once again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Thomas, sir, for coming in, and it was really incredible
Yeah.
hosting you. So thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Have a, have a,
Bye.
and have a wonderful week ahead. Bye bye.
Yeah, so like please. Thank you.